All right, today we're going to dig into one of the most persistent myths in the entire history of life on Earth, an idea that's really colored how we see the biggest animals that ever existed. Okay, let's just dive right in. You know the cliche, right? The massive Brontosaurus or Argentinosaurus with a body the size of a house but a brain no bigger than a walnut? This idea paints them as these clumsy, dim-witted giants, basically just evolutionary failures biding their time.
But what if that entire picture is just completely backward? What if the science actually tells us that their tiny brains weren't a weakness at all, but were actually a masterpiece of biological engineering? The real story here isn't about intelligence, it's about physics.
To really get this, we have to kind of reset what we think a brain is even for. We tend to look at it through our own human lens, as this engine for deep thoughts and creativity. But from an evolutionary point of view, that is not its main job, not even close.
A brain is first and foremost a control organ. Its number one goal is to run the body, that biological machine, as efficiently as it possibly can. See, evolution doesn't reward the smartest creature, it rewards the one that just gets the job done, surviving, reproducing, while burning the least amount of fuel. Anything beyond that is just waste.
And that whole principle of efficiency, well, it runs smack into some really hard limits. Biology doesn't get to write its own rules. It has to follow the laws of physics and thermodynamics, especially when it comes to energy.
To see what I mean, just look at us. Our brain is only about 2% of our body weight, but it's an absolute energy hog. It burns through a staggering 20% of our energy when we're just sitting still. Brain tissue is one of the most expensive things an animal can possibly make.
Now, for a giant animal, that cost becomes a nearly impossible problem because of something called allometric scaling. It sounds fancy, but it's a simple idea. As you get bigger, things don't scale up evenly. Your volume and your weight grow way faster than your surface area, which creates huge problems for things like heat and blood pressure.
And this is where it gets crazy. If a 60-ton sauropod had a brain that scaled up like ours does, it would be a biological nightmare. I mean, the brain itself would weigh hundreds of kilos. The heart would need to generate unimaginable pressure to pump blood all the way up there. And the heat it would produce, the animal would literally cook itself from the inside out. It just couldn't exist.
So here's the absolute crucial point. A small brain was not an evolutionary flaw. It wasn't a sign of being primitive. It was a mandatory adaptation. To get that huge, the brain had to be small, lightweight, and incredibly energy efficient. Physics made it non-negotiable.
And you know what? This super efficient design was the perfect tool for the job, given the life these giants lived. A big, expensive brain is really only good for solving complex problems, and for a sauropod, those problems just didn't exist.
I mean, a sauropod's daily routine was incredibly simple. It was basically a loop. Eat, walk slowly, eat some more, and let your giant body handle your temperature. Plus, their huge size meant that as adults, they had basically no predators. And that removes one of the biggest drivers for evolving a complex brain.
They didn't need to make split-second decisions. They didn't need to hunt in packs. They didn't need to figure out tools. Their main survival strategy was just being enormous. So a brain built for heavy-duty problem-solving would be like putting a supercomputer in a lawnmower. It's just a total waste of energy.
And this really gets to a core truth about evolution. It is ruthlessly economical. It doesn't build what isn't needed, and it will actively get rid of anything that costs more than it's worth. For a giant sauropod, a big brain wasn't an asset. It was a liability.
This focus on automation and efficiency also lets us finally put to bed one of the most famous and, frankly, bizarre myths in all of dinosaur anatomy.
You've probably heard it, the idea that dinosaurs had a second brain in their hips to control their massive back legs and tail. The image of a dinosaur thinking with its butt is pretty memorable, but it's completely wrong.
The reality is actually much more elegant. What paleontologists found was an enlarged space in the spinal column for a big bundle of nerves called a ganglion. This thing wasn't a brain. It wasn't thinking. It was more like an electrical substation or a router. It just helped manage all the massive nerve signals and automated reflexes for walking, freeing up the main brain from having to micromanage every single step. It's another beautiful example of extreme optimization.
So when you put all this together, the physics, the energy costs, the automated lifestyle, it really forces you to ask a bigger question. If their brains were perfectly suited for their world, what does that say about their place in history, and more importantly, how we define success? Let's just look at the raw numbers here.
The non-avian dinosaurs dominated this planet for over 160 million years. Modern humans, Homo sapiens, we've been around for maybe 300,000 years. If you're measuring success by sheer longevity and stability, their biological model was just astronomically more successful than ours has been so far.
Their small brains were not a bug. They were a feature. This was a system perfected for its purpose. They solved the problem of survival not by being clever, but by being massive. They automated their bodies, they minimized energy waste, and they built a body that was a walking fortress. It was a different path to success, sure, but no less valid.
And that's really where our own bias gets in the way. We evolved intelligence because we're small and we're weak. It was the only tool we had, and so we assume it must be the ultimate solution for everybody. But it's not. The dinosaurs prove that.
And that leaves us with a really powerful final thought. The success of the giant dinosaurs wasn't something they achieved in spite of their small brains. It was achieved because of them. They are the ultimate proof that in the grand, sprawling story of life on Earth, intelligence is just one strategy among many. But efficiency, that's the one rule that applies to absolutely everyone.